Hey everyone, it's Jonathan and welcome back to Every Version Ever. Today we're continuing our Christmas-themed episodes, and this time we're going back to a story we only recently finished, and we're talking about some Wind in the Willows Christmas episodes. Nicki and Sarah are back to join me to talk about a couple more episodes from the 1984 stop-motion Cosgrove Hall series. Plus, since we were doing Wind in the Willows Christmas, we figured it was only fitting to talk about the 1994 Martin Gates 2D animated special, Mole's Christmas. Mark Brown and I had talked about this one a few months ago as part of our look at all the Martin Gates Wind in the Willows productions, but I had wanted Sarah to see this one also, so I figured I'd throw it in as well. Then, if you've been enjoying the episodes with Nicki, Sarah, and I, we have a bonus episode on my Patreon. As usual, we had a ton of tangents that didn't really fit into what we were talking about, so I collected all of those, not just from this episode, but when we recorded earlier this year as well. So if you want more from us, make sure to check that out. I'll make that available for all members, even free ones, so feel free to subscribe. Okay, that's all for now. Let's get on with our conversation on more episodes from Cosgrove Hall as well as Mole's Christmas. Before we get into the Cosgrove Hall episodes, I felt like this is not related to the Cosgrove Hall series or movies, but because there was a Wind in the Willows Christmas special, I felt like we should at least talk about it. I did talk about it a little bit when I talked to Mark Brown about the series that this came out of, because this was a series of standalone TV specials. There were 3, but it started with this one, which I thought was an interesting choice, because the other 2 specials were the first half of the book and then the second half of the book, and then this one was in the middle, but they started with this one. And the weird thing is, I feel like I'm almost starting to like this. I did not like it the first time I watched it.
Out of everything that we're going to be talking about, this is the most accurate to the book.
Really?
Oh yeah.
The other 2, they're not really from the book. Like, they have little nods, but they're not
whereas
adapted.
This one, I'll try to talk about what's different and what's the same. But yeah, it's the closest. And some of the closest Wind in the Willows adaptation you're probably going to watch if you lump it in with other things too.
For the parts that were close to the book, I thought they did a really good job. There was just some things that they added in that I thought were really weird. And I think that's why it kind of annoyed me the first time I watched it, because I think I watched it like right around the time that I had just read this chapter, and I kept, like, the thing with the weasels. I was like, why are they throwing the weasels in here planning to rob them?
They're not in there at all. Spoiler. But, people have had over 100 years to read the book, so if you if you don't know by now.
And I'm not 100% sure if this is true, but I kept reading people talking about how popular this special was. And at least allegedly, this is one of the most exported UK-made TV specials, like Christmas specials, for that time period. Like, I think it said for like a 10-year time period between 93 and 2003, and it was exported to 213 countries.
Wow.
It is actually, wow. Okay, 213, that's a lot.
Yeah, that shocked me. It's like, why is this so popular? But now that I've watched it like 3 or 4 times, it is kind of growing on me, so I think I'm beginning to see what other people see in it.
If they're already familiar with the story, also it's pretty G-rated. I mean, unless you really want to stretch that. Like, oh, there was attempted robbery. But,
oh my gosh, they mentioned a little kid tinkling offhandedly.
Parental guidance.
That was another thing that I rolled my eyes at the first time I watched it. I was like, why are they putting this in here?
Probably just for the humor or the cuteness.
Yeah. It almost, and I have no backing for this, but it almost feels like some of those Christmas Carol like cartoons. It has that, I think it's the animation, like the style of animation that they're using, that feels kind of in that same vein.
I would be curious to know, because the person that made this, Martin Gates, he did a lot of adaptations of things, so I have a feeling that he'll eventually come up on my podcast again. I don't know if he did a version of A Christmas Carol. It wouldn't surprise me, but like, his thing was making, for lack of a better term, bargain bin movies.
Oh yeah, there's
like
a lot of those today too.
Yeah, the kind of things you'd find at Dollar General or whatever.
And that's a whole cottage industry right there, is rip-offs of popular properties.
Yeah. And we've talked about a few of them, like for Alice in Wonderland especially. I
Oh
haven't
yeah.
gotten into a whole lot of them in recent years, but I know they'll come up again because for some of the stories that I want to cover, I know that there are a lot of cheap rip-off versions.
Oh yeah. There's a if you go to any Disney, pick any Disney movie made in the past, well, 20 years. And
Hmm.
there are a couple of companies that make cheap CGI level things of them, multiple ones. And obviously before that there was hand-drawn stuff too, but
Yeah.
the the turnaround time on a CGI piece is not very much. So it
Hmm.
gets crazy pretty quickly.
But I feel like if you're talking about bargain bin stuff, this is kind of at the higher end of that.
Oh yeah. You can tell that there was heart, and like Sarah said, it's very true to the book. There is value here. There's the voice work is good. I love the little kid, the
Yes.
little mice singing.
Yeah.
Like that it feels kind of like what they did with the Peanuts Christmas special. Like they let kids sing as compared to trying to get an adult, and
Hmm.
pitch shift the voice.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that. I do have something to say about that scene, but we're not there yet. So I'll wait. I'll wait until unless are we doing this sequentially or just comments?
I kind of jumped the shark. I apologize.
I mean, we could go in sequential order if you want
Like
to,
not
but
not laboriously, but I just wanted to like at the beginning it seemed to deviate a little bit from the story, and then it seemed to go more on track. They do pass through the village, but you didn't have any conversations. Like they did it differently, but they were trying to capture the village, I guess.
hmm.
And there is, like I said before, this whole monologue about this bird in the cage and just like this sweet picture that he liked,
Hmm.
that he was creating. And there are no angry dogs. It's not followed by, oh, we went through a farmyard and then got chased type thing. That wasn't in there. They were adding excitement. And like we said, there are no weasels. They made it work within the storyline, but it was like they were trying to include maybe a little more action and slapstick into what is a pretty quiet. Like there's a lot of heart and emotion in the chapter, but it's a quiet story.
Hmm. I think for me, the thing that I felt the first time I watched this was that they were trying to pad the runtime.
Oh,
Because
like make it longer.
yeah, it just felt like they were stretching it out, adding in these weasels and
You might.
mice antics that weren't in the book.
Oh yeah, and like when they. Oh, okay, and when he first senses his home, it's like they're having him voice because reading the book. I think, it would be describing what's happening to Mole rather than Mole describing what's happening to Mole.
Hmm.
And I thought it was kind of awkward when he's trying to get Rat's attention. He looks like he's close enough to hear what he's saying. So I feel like maybe that could be confusing to the viewer or something. But no, I think they meant, I mean, literally in the book, he couldn't hear what he was saying. And I think they were concerned about a storm coming up. But
How long was Mole supposed to be away from home? Like,
oh, they never say, and it's basically like this. And I mean, you just kind of get the impression that they're roommates for however.
I assumed almost a year.
okay.
Because at the beginning of the book it says he's doing spring cleaning.
There's no indication that Mole intends to go home. And I could talk about that more, but that's part of the resolution of the chapter of like he was ready to go do other things, but he needed to have, he had this time of enjoyment back in his old
Right.
place.
Kind of going back one last time to kind of re-understand what he had behind him.
So dang, let's not be emotional. You're probably not feeling emotional over that, but it's like,
Oh
anyway.
no, but it is. It's that returning home to, like anyone, you go back home and you all that stirs up feelings, and it's, you go back to where you grew up or whatever, and there's all of that nostalgia and love and all of the memories that come rushing back when you return there. So I get it, 100%.
Somewhere in there, it maybe got a little less awkward, and they started to capture more of the spirit of the conversation. Honestly, this is an enjoyable. Like I've read this out loud oh, probably 3 or more times in my life. And I've gotten to the point, I don't know if I'm hammy about it, but there's just so much emotion that if you want to be emotional while reading it, and I kind of connect to Mole in this. I definitely do connect to Mole in this episode, like with how emotional he is, and then trying to. I suppose that I didn't mean to get all excited like that. And no, what about you? Like we don't have to. Yeah. But that whole interaction of him breaking down and crying, it was probably even more intense in the book. And Rat berating himself and just insisting that they go back. They lost a little bit of the dimension in here because unless you have overlay and a narrator in there, it's probably kind of hard to capture because Rat was very purposefully trying to get him to settle in and enjoy his home. And so they caught some of that. But it was maybe even more wily in the book, in a positive way, of manipulating him into enjoying himself. And there were no false starts into holes where other animals were living. That was another added.
Yes, that was another thing that I was annoyed by the first time I watched this.
You're having the reader's response. That's not the way it was. And then like with the field mice, the book has a whole carol written out that is not like I know the carol that they're singing, which is lovely, but it's a whole carol written out in the book, and I'm wondering, did it even exist in real life, or did he just write?
That's what I wondered because
the poem
we'll talk about it eventually when we get to the Cosgrove Hall episode. They actually do use that carol in that episode, and I went to the book and I saw that it was from the book.
In the one that we're gonna do next.
the Yuletide Entertainment.
Okay, and then like that's another thing in that next episode. And I'm jumping ahead too much probably, but when he titles the song as Dulce Domum, which I don't think they ever titled the song that, but that was the title of the chapter in the book, so it was a nice little loop in, I guess. But yeah, and then the whole part, I feel like, so you have the whole interaction of them moving around seats and everything. Well, yeah, you have the interaction of Rat sending one off for the food. I feel like there were more. I think maybe my brain made it just what I don't know what's my deal is, because when I read the book, I think I made it the group more masculine than what they did here, but I think part of that might just be my imagination, and also that there was one of them named Billy that was specifically mentioned. That may be part of my deal there. But in this one, you have a little girl mouse being sent off. I think maybe they were just trying to mirror just the behaviors of children, because there wasn't really anything about switching seats, I don't think, and the whole bit of talking about the play happens before the meal, but it probably helped to stretch out the story. To do it that way, the interest. Well,
all this stuff with the field mice, that's where this time around it started winning me over. I was like, okay, this is actually pretty cute, and I really like that they use the kids' voices, like you said. It makes it so much more real.
Well, the giggles and...
Yeah, it feels like little kids. And I always like it when shows use little kids to voice little kids. Like, it just gives it something extra.
Absolutely. And for as much as something like the Peanuts gets, in retrospect, a little bit of flack because it did that, it is, like you say, it's going to be a more real feeling. It's
charming.
Yeah, and it's kids that are watching this can relate to that.
Yeah.
They definitely used a better quality microphone here, too, than they would have had back in the 60s. So.
It sounded kind of like they were in a building when they were singing that song, but it was the Cathedral of the Woods, right? No, or maybe just his entryway. Yeah, acoustics in the entryway. There we go. And then the chapter does end with like them in bunk beds or something, like they had bedded down, but the way they ended it with them just being comfortable at the table was fine. Oh, yeah. Jonathan and I were both having the reaction when he first got there and lit the fire. It's just one match. No big deal. Oh, yeah. It's like me standing next to my fire pit struggling. It's like, I'm trying. I've got dryer lint. I've got, dry grass. Why?
I did the same thing. I think it took me because I had some garbage to burn tonight. And I was like, I think I used 5 matches to get the thing started.
I think maybe my logs were a little wet or something. I don't know.
I had cardboard and Kleenex, so...
Like, it's like, do fires only start easily when you don't want them to? What's up with
Well,
that?
it's the English fireplace versus an American fire
okay.
pit.
And
There's
their
the
logs.
difference.
Their logs are probably different too. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and when you consider that in theory you're dealing with a rat and a mole, they're maybe 6-8 inches tall, and the logs are quite a lot larger in comparison to them. So they're bigger, they burn easier.
I'm picturing like a rat-sized match that's just tiny.
That would be adorable.
Yeah. Yeah, oh man, this could be such a cute miniature set with a tiny little matchbox. Get little twigs for the logs.
That would be cute.
Anyway, I think that's most of it. Do you have more thoughts?
That's pretty much it. I mainly just want to talk about it because, like, if we're talking about Wind in the Willows Christmas, this was specifically a Wind in the Willows Christmas special, so I felt like...
And recommendable, I think, because if you're wanting something that's fairly accurate to the book, and it's cozy, it's safe.
Yeah, and I don't think I had the same reaction when I recorded with Mark. I don't think I liked this. Like, I watched it the one time, and I think I was probably a lot more negative on it that time. I think it's grown on me. It's now having watched it 3 or 4 times. Have I been Stockholm syndromed into liking it?
What, just because we're being positive, or?
No, like, it's trapped me, and I'm feeling good feelings about having been trapped by this thing.
Maybe it was some other element of the day that just warped the perception of like, I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I don't know.
I will say, of the ones we're going to discuss, I don't think I liked... and this is, again, purely my thing. It's nothing to do with the quality of the stuff. It wasn't my personal favorite, but I think too, just I'm so enchanted by the work that the Cosgrove Hall does with the stop motion and the quality of the stuff. And I know that you can't compare it based on production quality, because there is a lot of good stuff in this. There is. It didn't quite hit me as hard as what is coming. So
I think if I didn't have my connection with the book, it would be easy to agree with you. So my recommendation would just be like, sure, maybe trot this out if you have visiting kids or if you just need something like that. But my recommendation over that would definitely be the chapter in the book. And the other ones that we're going to talk about, they were fun. So I can't really blame you for feeling that way, but yeah. There's
a lot of good in this. Like, it's cute. It's, again, the kid singing is adorable. The way that Rat, tries to, encourage Mole about the qualities of his house, and everything that he brings in is positive.
But still, it's one of those things of, I appreciate it, but it's hard to, like, if you can fully capture the spirit of the chapter in something like this, that you probably would have to have a narrator, or just be, I don't know, Beatrix Potter that one or something, because that would, yeah. I
get you.
They didn't fully capture it, but they did a good job. So.
Well, let's move on to Yuletide Entertainment. This one apparently has 2 versions. When I first looked up this one on YouTube, I immediately found one that claimed to be an uncut version, and I saved it. And then when I went to send it to you, Nikki, it was gone. So I think somebody's account got nuked, but I have
more
to say,
than likely,
if anybody's listening to this one, try to find the uncut version. Like, I did look more, and I could not find another copy. I would hope that it's still out there somewhere. But there is a song that they've added back in that we already talked about that I don't think is in the other version. Apparently there was like a VHS release that had this on it, and then a future DVD release did not have it on it. And this is hard to find in the US. Like, they did not release like a full series in the US. It was only in the UK because this is a British series. So I would hope that someday someone would re-release this and have an uncut version. But I feel like if you're going to watch this one, I mean, watch it anyways, but find the uncut version, because I do really like that scene. But yeah, this is our fourth and fifth episode of the show that we've watched, because we watched 3 other episodes that were based on the book. So this is our first look at, I guess, how this show handles quote-unquote fan fiction.
Very well, actually.
Yeah, and I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised by this. I can see why so many people love this series. Because up until now, my main exposure to fan fiction of Wind in the Willows has been the Willows in Winter, which Sarah did not like. I did find it quite funny, Toad going insane with his airplane, but it does not have the same charm as the Wind in the Willows. It's just ridiculous. But I feel like this show, at least from the few episodes that I've seen, really does capture the charm of the book, even when it goes off and does its own thing with the characters. And I think this episode is my favorite of the Christmas things that we'll be talking about.
I can't really blame you. I mean, it's cute.
The main gist of this episode is that the animals of the river are putting on a Christmas presentation, like a talent show type thing. And I think they do a good mix of humor and sentiment and good performances. Like you have the weasels trying to do a joke thing, and one just can't grasp how the jokes work and keeps wanting to change things, much to the disgust of the chief weasel.
Not to jump ahead, but I wonder if that's the same weasel that wants to dress up like a fairy queen.
I wondered.
That weasel was always different.
Yes.
And then the scene with Otter playing the piano, like, he's not good in the traditional sense of being good, but I was, like, pleasantly surprised at how well they portrayed someone, like, trying to play the piano who knows how to play but isn't that good at it yet.
They're not as prepared as maybe they could have been. This is like capturing the foibles of real life.
Yeah, because, like, a lot of times if a movie or a show wants to do somebody playing the piano not good, they'll just have them, like, bang awkwardly on the keys and it just sounds awful. This, like, it sounded good but just kind of off.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know about you, but I've heard a decent amount of that in my life. So
It was maybe minor key as compared to major kind of a deal.
You maybe needed to practice a few more times before taking that public.
But yeah, I liked that scene just based on the fact that I thought they did a good job of portraying someone awkwardly playing the piano. Kind of good, but not that great. And then you've got Rat playing the accordion, or maybe it's called a concertina, like a little mini accordion. But he's singing the Ducks A-Dabbling song from the book.
Throwback to the main movie, too, because they made a bigger deal of that than the book did.
And then I really liked the scene with Badger showing slides from his world travels. I'm guessing this is a thing in the show because it's also referenced in the next episode that we're going to be talking about. Badger talking about having been to India and probably elsewhere too, but like India seems to be the main point of reference because he has a slide of the Taj Mahal. And there's a little character here. I guess his name is Billy Bunny. I love his voice. It's like, it's obviously like some guy just doing a high squeaky voice. But the way he said, "Oh, crumbs, Dad, look at that." That character just cracked me up.
Yeah, if you wait too long, you'll see him out back chain smoking.
What?
As he's the theater, the stage manager, and he's got to deal with everybody else's stuff. So he takes it out and starts. That's kind of a stereotypical thing, I guess, of behind the scenes people in theater.
The chain smoking or the making deals?
The chain smoking.
Now you're making me think of Hoodwinked.
And then you've got the scene with Toad trying on mustaches and accidentally swallowing one and choking.
This was probably your favorite thing in the special.
The noises he was making. And then that little bunny character goes in to tell him that he's got 4 minutes. And he sees him choking. He's like, "Oh, golly Moses!"
The fact he was actually able to make out what Toad was saying is amazing.
And imitated his gagging pretty well, too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They weren't voiced by the same person, were they?
I don't know.
They didn't necessarily sound the same, but that doesn't mean anything.
Jonathan's gonna find out.
Absolutely. Jonathan, make it so.
The only people credited in the episode are the main four and the narrator, and then everybody else has other voices.
So we can pretend.
I guess speaking of cast, we didn't mention it the last episode talking about the other episodes, but between the movie and the show, Rat was recast. The person who played Rat in the movie was given the role of the narrator, so he wasn't like fired or anything. He just moved to be the narrator now. And then Rat is now voiced by Peter Sallis, who...
Childhood.
Yes, he's Wallace from Wallace and Gromit.
And Cleggy.
Yes, on Last of the Summer Wine.
And I feel like maybe I'm forgetting some other thing that he was.
Probably. He's done a lot of stuff. But like his most famous thing probably is Wallace, but then to us who grew up watching Britcoms on PBS, Last of the Summer Wine.
Middle-aged to elderly British person might be even noted just as much for Last of the Summer Wine. I don't know, because that ran for a million years. The things that, like, there were probably a lot of jokes that we didn't understand growing up.
Yeah.
And I think we're still susceptible, in my household anyway, to quoting that show, even though we haven't watched it lately. Where were we? The mustache. Yeah.
Yes.
So then Mole was put on the spot to do a special, and it worked out beautifully because his friend supported him, and, well, actually friends.
Yes, they say Toad was supposed to do Gilbert and Sullivan, which I think whoever wrote this series has a thing for Gilbert and Sullivan, because in the next episode we're going to be talking about, they do Pirates of Penzance, and then I was looking at the Wikipedia page, just going through the notes for the shows. Like, Gilbert and Sullivan is mentioned more than once, like not even in these episodes. So I feel like somebody who was writing the show just liked Gilbert and Sullivan and kept slipping in references.
and or maybe we're trying to think of entertainment relevant to the...
That too.
How long... Oh, this is another... How long were Gilbert and Sullivan producing?
I forget.
Like,
I looked them up
that?
last night when I was making my notes, but now I don't remember. I know it was like the 1800s to some time. They collaborated on 14 comic operas between 1871 and 1896. Okay.
So fairly current to the publishing of the book.
But yeah, I liked Mole's little, you've got to have a little bit of style number.
Oh, that was cute.
Such gentle soul.
And then this is where you have the added scene of the mice choir singing Dulce Domum. And I looked it up. It is definitely from the book. And I thought they did a really good job turning it into a choral piece. Because, like, it's in the book, it's basically just poetry. You don't have music.
No sheet music included.
But I thought they did such a good job turning this into a piece for a choir for this episode.
If you ever find out whether that was an actual song or whether they had to turn it into one, I'd be interested to know.
There is a song called Dulce Domum, composed in 1876. And it says this phrase is used as the title of Chapter 5 of the 1908 novel, The Wind in the Willows.
Okay, so it's 1908, not 1912. I wonder why I was thinking 1912. So they may very well have been singing.
I don't know. I guess if anybody's listening and you know the answer, let us know.
Yes, please.
But yeah, after the mice choir, that's basically the end of the show.
Except for Toad finally gets the mustache out and comes out.
Yeah, well, that's after everybody's left. He hacks up the mustache and he's upset that everybody's gone. He can't do his song.
Well, he still could. He just wouldn't have the audience.
Toad needs an audience.
True.
His friends were there.
That's true. I feel like Toad would probably be happy just doing something in front of his friends.
Tell Billy to put out a cigarette and get back in there. Listen to that song. No, Billy was not smoking on this episode, to anybody wondering.
But then the other Christmas episode that I want to talk about was Fancy Dress. And this one is, like, as I was watching it, I was thinking, this isn't, like, fully Christmas. Like, it's listed as a Christmas episode online, but it's more like Christmas themed. Like, it says it's after Christmas, so it's like a post-Christmas party.
New Year's. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. There's Christmas decorations still up, some nods to Christmas, but like I barely would call this a Christmas episode. But it was still within the theme, and it was fun, so I'm glad we included it. But this one is about all of the animals now putting on a fancy dress party, and you've got them singing a song as they'll decide who they're going to be. And I don't know if this was supposed to be like a visual gag or not, but Mole and Badger both decide to be Indians, but two completely different Indians.
I never connected that.
Because you have Mole putting on like a big Native American costume, and Badger has apparently made friends with like a Raja or somebody in India on his travels. So he has this whole get-up that he was given.
Very fancy.
He makes some comment about this is what he always wears. I mean, if you've got the costume, you might as well.
I mean, it's an interesting throwback to the fact that the UK was, like, India is a UK Commonwealth, or was a UK Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm. It probably has something to do with that, because this would have been during that time, and I don't know how many years before this Badger would have been traveling. So
he said 70 something at one point, and I'm not sure if he was talking about like the wine that he had, or if he was talking about the when he was traveling. But if this came out like, you know,
1870,
I would imagine so.
I guess that makes sense, especially if you're going to ascribe human years to these creatures.
Yeah. Well, that, and like in his travels, that could have been if he was serving in the military, or if he was like literally just traveling, or, you know, there's so many things it could be. Because Badger certainly comes off as a wanderer of sorts.
Yeah, a very knowledgeable person.
Incredibly, yeah. A lifetime of going and doing.
You have the weasels with their evil plot.
They all want to dress as burglars so that they can rob the place. And they think they can get away with robbing it because they'll be dressed as burglars. And if anybody sees them, they'll just think they're doing it as part of their costume.
Just say it in a way that makes it sound like a joke. Like, I get that mentality of sometimes the truth, if you just state the truth, it's not necessarily going to be believable or seem as believable. It's like the Chief Weasel's plot, and he was going to go as a policeman, and never mind that he got to have a different costume. The other guy wasn't supposed to be the fairy or whatever.
I was kind of confused why the other weasel wanted to be the fairy on the Christmas tree, and I was like, does he mean an angel? But apparently it's a thing to call the thing you put on top of the tree a fairy. Like, maybe it's a British thing, but I looked it up and it's a thing. There's even a whole song about it. Wow. I guess it's a thing.
This just got more educational.
I just thought it was this weasel being dumb and thinking an angel was a fairy.
Well, you know those lights that hang down that have like they'll either twinkle, or they've got like the strands that are like 6 or 8, and then like, you know, like what we call icicle lights over there. Those are called fairy lights. Mm-hmm. Not quite the same thing, but
probably bigger on the fairy thing than we are here, as much as Americans like fairies.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's more, at least some areas, there's basis for that, like areas, well, I guess it's more Ireland than England, but they have areas that are cordoned off because they're called fairy rings. Like, you're not allowed to build, you know, highways or things in those places, because those are traditional places of not magic, but like fairy stuff. So
like they believe something supernatural is going on there. Exactly.
It dates back to Celtic. One of my favorite things over there is oh god, I can't think of what it's called. I apologize, I'm going to completely screw this up, but there's a tree where if someone has wronged you, you can take a strip of their clothing and put it on this tree, and it will, in theory, curse them.
Oh.
It's called the cursing tree. But you'll see trees along the way, and they're covered in pieces of clothing.
There's a lot of bitterness going down in Ireland, apparently.
Some some extent. I mean, you know what? If it's
I mean,
a good way to...
it keeps you out of jail, but gets rid of some of your feelings.
Exactly.
Wouldn't it be terrible if you got up to the tree to put your little strip of cloth on there, and then you recognized a piece of cloth from the same person that you're both going there to curse each other?
You know what? That would give you more reason to curse that other person.
That's when you like take it down and you go shake it in their face. So, like,
see, but I think there was something about that too. If you did that, you would receive whatever curse was meant for them.
Oh, dangity!
Double cursed.
Dangity! Oh man, that's when it starts getting complicated when you're trying to nix your curses and curse.
Absolutely. See, it's best if you're going to commit to put something on the tree, you have to know that you're going to commit to it. It's like a monkey's paw. You know, if you do this thing, you accept the consequences that come with it. And it's never going to be what you expect.
This sounds healthy.
Oh, 100%. Well, you
nothing bad could come.
There's a lot of. I mean, that part of Ireland is quite Catholic, and there's a lot of passive aggressive natures. And when you're talking Catholics, I know this because I am one.
Is it like we're supposed to be nice, but I want to get you back?
It's called being human and pushing all that stuff down too far, and then it comes out in strange ways.
You hobbling along with your little strip of cloth trying to find the tree.
Exactly.
Think you're going to overcharge me on my phone bill? So, the plot was to rob everybody at the Christmas party without them knowing it, but they made a fatal mistake because Toad had said in his invite that he was going to make a surprise appearance. Nobody knew where he was, and Weasels kept sticking the stolen goods into the suit of armor, and these little noises kept emitting from it. Hopefully they didn't take off with him, because that would be really bad if you're the owner and you're alone with all the thugs and stolen goods.
That would be.
I also liked how after, well, I mean, they're tossing stuff in through the whole thing, but after they've put this plan into motion, they have this performance that's supposed to distract everybody. And I don't know why, it cracked me up because the Weasel introduced himself and his burglarious colleagues doing the policeman's chorus from Pirates of Penzance. Again, Gilbert and Sullivan for whatever reason. And then while they're singing, they're going around, everybody's distracted, so they're stealing all their stuff.
It was a pretty good number.
And they end up dropping the whole entire suit of armor down the stairs with Toad. And then the Chief Weasel pretends to be a real policeman. Apparently nobody recognizes him as the Chief Weasel. But his plan is that he's going to arrest all the weasels and take all of the stolen goods as evidence.
Yeah. Would that it had worked.
But apparently Toad is the only one who recognizes that this is the Chief Weasel, and him pointing this out somehow makes everybody else realize who he is, and then all the weasels run for it. And then they're all questioning why Toad was in the suit of armor, and he said that was his costume and he got stuck in it. And then somebody makes a joke about him wanting to be a knight in armor, but accidentally spending the night in armor. And they're all laughing and Toad is annoyed. And that's the end.
His pride was damaged.
Toad's pride seems to get damaged a lot.
I mean, at least he's consistent.
I mean, it's probably good for him. If his pride went unchecked, he might become the Toad from the Willows in Winter.
If I was him, maybe I'd be irritated at that moment too. It's like, I was getting robbed, and I was stuck in my costume, and you're making a joke about it. But yeah, these are cozy. Maybe I'm overusing that word, but it fits with Wind in the Willows things, and
yeah,
it fits with what they did, which either wasn't even Wind in the Willows, but it's still nice, and they obviously put a lot of attention into these shows with all of the little props
and all the characters feel like the characters from the Wind in the Willows, just extended.
Thankfully. Yeah, the gentleness of Mole and the gruffness of Badger, and yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I know, Cosgrove's stuff is just, it's so well put together and it's beautiful and it's made with such love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell that they really like these characters and want to do right by them. It's not just somebody trying to make a cheap VHS they can sell at Dollar General to somebody's
Yeah.
grandma who thinks they're buying an actual Disney movie.
Oh no.
No, I've really liked these. Like, of course, the 95 version, being the one that I grew up with, is probably technically going to stay my favorite. But the more I've watched the stuff from Cosgrove Hall, the more it has grown. And now I think it's kind of like on par with my nostalgic one. I really think it's that good. And the show, I can see why the show has so many fans, why those were the first comments that I was getting on the podcast of talking about how great the show was. It really seems like a really charming continuation of The Wind in the Willows and a faithful adaptation of the characters, if it's not an adaptation of the book itself.
My favorite remains the book, but this is another way to help keep the book alive, just as long as you don't, totally ignore its existence. And it's a nice, yeah, they did a good job.
I would agree. And as someone that has a limited experience with Wind in the Willows, this has been a nice kind of introductory thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
But with the understanding that, like, with any of these, I mean, whatever book to movie or TV show thing you're going to see, there's always going to be adaptations and changes and all that good stuff. And these are solid adaptations, from what you guys have said, and I trust your judgment on them, since Wind in the Willows is life.
Well, I think that is all we have for these Christmas Wind in the Willows episodes. We will probably be back next year for something else, if not more Wind in the Willows. One of these days I would like to at least do the first season, but I don't know if I'll get back to Wind in the Willows next year or not. It would be nice. But until then, do you guys want to let people know where they can find more of your work, Sarah?
Turnip Wilson on Society 6 and Redbubble, and Turnip Wilson Creates on Etsy. Whimsical and realistic watercolors that I do that tie in nicely with some of the stories that we do together.
And Nicki?
You can find me on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide array of random, obscure, and straight up bad movies.
Okay. Well, until next year.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to Every Version Ever. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My Linktree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.